Welcome to San Diego Integral, February 12th, 2022. Today's presentation will be The Creative Power of the Culture Wars, presented by Jeff Salzman. Hi, and welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Jerry Golick. I'll be kicking off the meeting tonight, and we'll also have some assistance from Kathleen and Eloy and Tom. I'd just love to welcome everybody here. We have a really exciting presentation with Jeff Salzman on the creative power of the culture wars. And we'll begin shortly, but just a little bit of housekeeping first. Just want to mention that we will be recording this meeting, and the link for the recording will be posted to Meetup, to the Meetup website, and also on YouTube in a couple of days. And if you prefer not to be seen on video, you can turn off your camera and type any questions you have in the chat box. But note that we only record the main speaker, not the gallery, and we don't record the breakout sessions. You can find information about San Diego Integral on our website at sandiegointegral.org. And we're also on Meetup and Facebook, and you can find those links on the website. And if you join one of those groups in Facebook or Meetup, then you can be notified of meetings that we have coming up. And if you do have any questions or comments about meetings, you can contact one of our leadership team through those sites of Meetup or Facebook. I'll mention that next month we're going to be meeting on March 12th at the same time slot, 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, and the topic is going to be paradoxes, polarities, and interdependence of individual and collective development, presented by Abigail Lyman, and she's from Pacific Integral. And finally, we'd invite you to make a small donation to San Diego Integral if you'd like. And those donations help to cover our meetup fees and the web hosting. And also we're anticipating the need for some additional technology to host hybrid meetings. We're going to try to do live virtual meetings once we transition back to our original in-person monthly gatherings as the pandemic hopefully clears soon. So you can make donations at sandiegointegral.org if you'd like to. We will have some Q&A sessions today. And for this, please, for the Q&A sessions, please type your questions into the chat. That's the way we're going to handle that today. And then one of the hosts will be reading the questions to Jeff. This meeting is going to last until 6 p.m. Pacific time, but I will mention that we keep the space open for another half hour to an hour afterwards for sort of an informal social segment. So if you can, well, we'd love to have you stick around for another half hour to an hour after that. Excuse me, and that's a informal discussion, questions, and so please stick around. I'd like to take just a minute to help bring everybody into the space here with a short centering meditation. So if you would like to find a comfortable position, feet on the floor, take a few deep breaths. Feel yourself centered, grounded, connected to the earth. Also, notice your connection upwards. Some may envision a connection, energetic connection to the heavens, but become aware of the infinite space and emptiness all around us, out of which everything, including us, arises moment to moment. Focus your attention on your physical body. Notice the contours of your physical body and the different movements, feelings, energies that are present inside the body. And soften the boundary of the physical body, feeling our energetic connections to each other. And we have 75 people on the meeting here today, and we've all decided to be here instead of anywhere else in the world. So that's pretty special to be connected in that way. So as we're feeling this energetic connection, notice the respect and connection that we have with each other in the time that we have together. And with that, we'd like to return your attention to the screen. And before we do start the presentation, we'd just like to welcome new people. So if you're new, just give us a wave on the screen. On our smaller meetings, we invite people to introduce themselves, but we have so many new people today, we aren't going to have time for that. But we are glad to have new folks here, and we hope to see you come back for future meetings. So thanks for joining us. So that's all the housekeeping. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Tom, who is going to introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, as usual, for opening such wonderful space. I get to do the introduction to Jeff. As you know, Jeff Salzman is the creator of the 10-year running Daily Evolver podcast, where he applies integral theory and spiral dynamics to the news of the world. In the early 2000s, Jeff worked with Ken Wilber alongside Diane Musho Hamilton and the late beloved Terry Patton to create a series of seminars on integral theory applied to varied disciplines, including psychology, spirituality, and business. In 2007, Jeff co-founded the Boulder Integral, a brick and mortar center for integral study and practice. Jeff has a master's degree in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism from Naropa University. Jeff once described his work on the Daily Evolver to me as an on-ramp for folks new to integral. It's not only what Jeff says as an integrally embodied pundit, but it's the space he opens where those new to integral feel a new state experience. As a result, those new end up realizing a deeper need they always had and decide, I might just hang around for a while. This is Jeff's superpower. Perhaps some of you were at the What Next conference in 2012 that Jeff hosted each morning. Jeff would get us going with movement.
Very insightful.
While reminding us of the joy of coming together. The art of the deeply subtle waiting to emerge each day. He would remind us of the rare opportunity we had to interpenetrate and co-create with each other we space in an attempt to consciously stabilize the collective. As many of you know, the Daily Evolver is Jeff's workbench. This podcast is developmentally aware, but a fluid container where the ineffable frequently arises in his listeners.
Makes sense.
I believe that Jeff consistently manages to bring forth an energetic state by tapping his own embodied resources. Finally, see if you can feel the energy in this. His greeting each day before the podcast. Hello, folks. Jeff Salzman here. Please join me in giving Jeff a warm San Diego Integral greeting.
Hello, my name is Nigar Batul. Excuse me, Tom.
All right.
Hello, Tom. I have a
I
question.
think we can take it from here. We're good to go. All right. Well, yeah, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to San Diego Integral.
Jeff
And
Salzman,
thank
more
you
like
so
Jeff
much
Salesman.
for inviting me to be with you today. Thank you, Tom Habib.
Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Wonderful to see you again. We've done many a workshop together, and I appreciate your work in creating San Diego Integral and everyone's work in doing that. Special thank you also to Kathy Andrews and Jerry
Yes,
Golick
thank you so
for
much.
hosting the meeting today and handling the Q&A and the breakouts and all that kind of Zoom stuff. It's just great to be here. I mean, I hope we're all having a great Saturday. I'm sitting under 10 fresh inches of snow.
Chut
in
chop kar
Colorado.
pagal mein
And
who's
I
looking
just
my
can't think of a better way to spend a Saturday than to hang out with other integral thinkers and apply our superpower
My
to
name is
the
Nigar
culture war that is
Batu.
raging all around us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit and just sort of set the scene and sort of put some integral frame around what's going on, or at least as I see it, and then give you a chance to talk about that as well. And we'll do breakouts for about 15 minutes. And then we'll just see where it goes from there with questions and comments, and we'll see if we can work our way forward. The subhead of this is fighting and friending our way forward. So I trust we'll do more of the latter, but let's get going here.
What's up?
So-
My name is Hai.
What integral theory and integral thinking brings to the party is the idea of cultural evolution and the spirit of cultural evolution. I mean, science brings us the teachings of scientific evolution, that 13.8 billion years ago, something emerged out of nothing. And, as the old joke goes, how do you create the modern world? Well, you get a big mess of hydrogen and leave it alone for 13.8 billion years. And that's what happened, is that we had the evolution of matter, the evolution of life, and the evolution of consciousness and culture. Consciousness being the individual expression, culture being the collective expression. And where the rubber hits the road with integral is how integral helps us to see the world and evolution within ourselves. I mean, we can literally feel that urge, as Walt Whitman said, the procreate urge of the world. Urge and urge and urge, he said. Always the procreate urge of the world. And we can also feel it in our culture. And it lets us be friendlier to our life and to our world. And so that's what we're going to do. And I think I know we have some new people here, but we're going to do sort of an intermediate session. And Tom recommended an article by Jason Hewitt called "Using Spiral Dynamics to Understand Development." It's a terrific article. I encourage you to read it if you haven't. It really lays out the evolution of culture as seen by spiral dynamics and integral. And in terms of the culture war, as most of us experience it in the developed world, particularly, the war that is going on is the war between traditionalists and postmodernists, and with the modernists sort of squeezed in the middle. So let's just look at that. The traditionalists are, and we all know them, these are the God and country people. These are the social conservatives. These are people who we would say, from a developmental perspective, have a mythic view of life. This world is not their home. It's an enchanted view where they are children of God, or they are obedient and part of a transcendent world. And yet, the home and hearth and family is sort of the center of the heart of these people. And they like the rules the way they are. And they like the roles the way they are. They like men and women and mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. And I remember reading something that really struck me here. Was we talk about, what makes a conservative, what makes a liberal, what makes a progressive, secular, all of this stuff. And it was a survey that showed that the best predictor of conservative versus liberal is conservatives are people who live less than 70 miles from where they were born. And I can see that with myself and my sister. We're two ends of the spectrum here. My sister was a traditionalist at heart. She never wanted to leave home. She had to because of family and husband and so forth, but her heart is back at the homeland. Me, I loved it, but 35 first cousins, grandma and grandpa, it's all very precious to me and more precious as I get older. But I knew by age 6 that I would be leaving home. And, it's a question that I've often pondered is that what makes people one way or the other? And what makes people develop? I mean, what is going on here? And I remember working with Ken Wilber, and he said, that's the one thing we don't know. And he would sometimes say, karma could be the answer. We all have a karmic stream, and this planet may have a karmic stream. But at any rate, the traditionalists are at the right end of the political spectrum. And then we have the modernists. And the modernists are secular. It's one of the things that Ken Wilber also would point out, and it was remarkable. He would say that when we move from traditional to modern, we move from a world where God is everywhere to a world where God is nowhere. The world is disenchanted. We become rational. We can use logic. We realize this is a great achievement of evolution, that the world is knowable on its own terms. And we can use rationality and logic. And in terms of the contemporary society, the modernists are the trust the science people. And we have learned huge lessons in this COVID pandemic about which ways we can and can't trust the science, what it can do, what it can't. And, welcome to the continued education of humanity. Modernists are individualists, they're materialists, they believe in meritocracy, at least as they see it, and they feel suffocated by traditionalism. They want to, again, leave that home. So there's that. And then we have the postmodernists. And the postmodern stage of development came online, you might say with Oscar Wilde, you might say with Mark Twain, but it really came online after World War II. And this is a stage of development where a new sort of antenna unfurls. And we become sensitive. Claire Graves called it the sensitive self. We become sensitive to interiors and other people's interiors. This is the world of psychology and self-expression. We are world-centric. We're embarrassed by patriotism. We see ourselves as citizens of the world. We see the limits of materialism and modernity, and we become anti-materialist. This was really, the big flourishing was in the 60s with the counterculture, the hippies and the anti-materialist, the sensitive self. And the driving force of the postmodernist stage, and we can see it, these are the liberals, the progressives, is that they want to rehabilitate and revalorize, if you will, the victims of the previous stages of development. So we have, with the traditionalists, we have the world separated between saints and sinners. They want the sinners online. Modernity divides the world between the winners and losers. They want the losers online. Actually, if we want to go back to pre-traditional, into the warrior stage, or I love what the article, what is it, that Jason wrote. He called it the wolf pack. This is the red stage of development. That divide, and this is most of human history, divides the world between predator and prey. So the people who are left out, marginalized, exploited by the other people. So this is how the sensitive self wants to bring these people online. And so we have in current culture, the woke movement. We have the, the anti-racist, the anti-racist. We have the gender fluidity realizations. I mean, this is all happening online. This is a new stage of development that is really fluorescing right now in new ways. And we can see it in real time. It's so fascinating to see. And one of the things we understand, or part of the sort of integral worldview here, is that there are fanatics at every stage of development. There, of course, traditional, this is the definition of fanatics, the religious fanatics, the nationalists fanatics. Modernity has the materialist fanatics who want to completely disenchant the world and see everything in terms of what can be seen and measured scientifically. Consciousness is reduced to a relationship between synapses in the brain, that sort of thing. So and then we have, of course, the postmodernists, the woke fanatics that we see arising, and they're duking it out with everybody. And again, at Integral, we can become friendly to the whole thing. We talk about first tier stages. This is that that red wolf pack warrior stage, the blue or amber traditional stage, orange modern stage, green postmodern stage. Then there's the next stage, which is the integral stage, and that's us, at least on our best day. And at the integral stage, we begin to feel constricted by all of these previous stages. That no one of them is enough anymore. We don't like to demonize other stages the way we used to. We, in a sense, move to higher ground where we're in a way up on the mountainside, and we can see these stages down there duking it out. And we have sort of a love for all of them, and we see the value of all of them. So we often talk about integral arising in two stages. The first stage, the teal or yellow stage in spiral dynamics, and then the turquoise stage. And the first stage, the teal stage, is where we hold multiple perspectives, where we deliberately, it's fun to hold multiple perspectives. When we see a news story about the Republicans and the Democrats and the Bidens and the Trumps, we want to feel into what each one is bringing to the party. We have a flexibility of mind. Claire Graves called integral the universal donor, the one who gets everybody. And then as we do that in teal, we take these perspectives and see this sort of the bigger matrix and how it all fits together. Then at some point, we begin to identify, not with any single perspective, but with the space within which perspectives arise. And that is, all of these stages are radical. think of the difference between traditionalists and modernists and postmodern. Integral's just as different in this new way of having this bigger space, this bigger antenna, this bigger sensitivity, where at some point you realize that the whole thing is alive. You know, the whole evolutionary system, the Big Bang, it's there, you know, there's something going on here. I maintain that there's a religion in here somewhere for Integral, and I think we're developing it. But at some point we can just feel it. And that's why we talk about first tier fights its way forward. It also friends its way forward for sure. But at second tier, the characteristic, the defining characteristic is love and creativity for the whole thing. And, you know, that's the ultimately spiritual dimension of Integral that renders it, you know, unfit for a lot of cultural discussion. I mean, you can't talk about that with the vanguard of, you know, punditry and intellectualism in America for sure is still very orange. You know, it's postmodern too, and most people have a foot. You know, we have, you know, the wars going on within us as well. We have a foot in both camps or three camps. You know, we can relate to all of it, a lot of people. But at Integral, it all starts to harmonize. And that's the beauty of it. There's this new friendliness and creativity and love for the whole mess, the whole catastrophe that, you know, is a spiritual expansion. So with that said, I'll stop there and give you all a chance to share a little bit about what comes up when you think about what I just talked about. How do you relate it to what's going on culturally, politically? What concerns you? Where's the juice for you? Climate or race or social media or foreign policy, COVID, MAGA, you know, whatever it might be. And where are you with it? You know, most of us, our conversations have to be at first tier because that's where our friends are and our family are. Here's a chance to talk to other people who are, at least again, on a good day, consciously working on this new stage of development, of human development, of the human story. And it's important that we carry this forward and we become conscious of it. So that's what I want to do. So Kathy will break us into groups of 3 or 4, and we will just have an adult conversation with each other for about 15 minutes. And you can go in order. I would suggest that you go in the order of where your birthdays appear on the calendar. So maybe just do it that way. And the first person might manage it so that we make sure that everybody gets a chance to share. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to break into groups. You'll find yourself in a room with 3 or 4 other people. If you haven't turned on your camera, it's a good idea to do that, but you don't have to. And so you can see each other, but however it works is great. And again, share with other people what's coming up for you and how you see the culture war and you know, politics and culture and what's going on all around us. Okay, so Kathy, take it away.
I'm going to make it 16 minutes so people have time to juggle a little bit and figure out who's going to talk first. And I wrote down the questions that Jeff just asked. So at about 5-minute intervals, I will post those in to remind you to break. We want to have everybody take a turn to talk, but you know, there's no real rules here. So, you know, if you feel like having more of a popcorn, we just want to make sure everybody really gets their turn to ponder these questions. So I've got these breakout rooms assigned, and you guys go and have a great discussion with each other, and see you back in about 16 minutes.
All right, so we're back from the breakout groups. If you have a comment or question, I'd like to move into the Q&A and that sort of a more open discussion, large group discussion, if you will. Just type them up in the comment section as best you can. And Kathy and Jerry will manage that and help me out with it. But I'll just start with a little bit of a rundown of what happened in the group that I was in. And it was great. It was wonderful because for one thing, we had a person who knew nothing about Integral and who just had been invited and was getting it. And it just reminded me of, when we talk about integral consciousness, which is this new stage of consciousness, and not just a new stage, but a new tier of consciousness, if you will, if you really buy into the theory, that there are people who are flying at the integral stage, if you will, the integral altitude, and they know nothing about Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics or any of this. And then there's the self-identified integral movement. And, we talked about that too. Lynn Fuentes and is part of that, really wants to, how do we put that together? How do we communicate and move forward, help each other out? Where this self-identified integral really kicks in. And when it does, one of our members, Kathy, was talking about, she was the one who really knew nothing about it until a week or so ago, that it just made such sense. It's such a relief. If you're flying at that integral altitude and you're just sort of politically homeless and friendly to everybody, and you still have a point of view and you're still in the game and you're still in the fight, but you just can't find it in your heart to hate people like you used to. And it's like, I remember myself, does God exist? Does not exist? All of these arguments begin to, metabolize in a way where when you do hear about integral, it's like, oh my God, yes. And I was sharing that happened for me, I don't know, I think 20 plus years ago, when I was, I had kissed all the frogs in the, self-development and human potential movement. And I was at Naropa and I was meditating and I was raised a good Christian boy. And then I was a good atheist. And, I was a Republican, then I was a Democrat, and I read Ayn Rand, and then I was reading Noam Chomsky, and I did this and it's that. And I walk into a bookstore and I see laying on the bookstore table a book that said Up from Eden. And in that moment, I swear to God, it was half of my integral realization to this day happened in that moment where it was, oh, okay, we're going up from Eden. We haven't fallen from paradise. We're rising. And that changed everything. This is a whole new, organization of understanding of culture, politics, myself, just coalesced into this new stage of consciousness. And that's, when we talk about these stages of consciousness, it's not just what we think, it's literally how we think. It's, what are the psychological mechanisms? And developmental psychology is very good, at pointing out we move from concrete operational, we move from actually, one of the great things about integral theory is that we can see the evolution of culture. There's a certain way in which that recapitulates itself in our own evolution. We're born into a sort of a world melded with mother and the environment. We're not really self-conscious. We don't feel embarrassed when we pee our pants or our diapers. It's just all good. I remember that. I remember when I remember looking at the the birds in the mobile over my crib and realizing that they were something other than me. You know, we can all recognize that time when we became self-conscious. And then we can recognize that time where we became what we would call red. And this is the no stage. And, you know, I want to differentiate from the world. And I'm not as melded as I was. And I remember that in myself when one day, and I don't know why, but one day it was no longer okay for my mother to give me a bath in the sink in front of her girlfriends. I just said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so we could see that move. And then we can see where we move into, you know, I want to be a good little Christian boy, or I want to be a Boy Scout or a Girl Scout. I want to be good. I understand good and evil. This is this move into traditionalism, where the whole world suddenly separates into, you know, God and the devil, good and evil, right and wrong. We get organized, we become obedient, we want to conform, we want to be part of the group. And for some people, that's as far as they go. They can become very good, wonderful people at that stage of development. And we know people like that. But for some of us, that's not enough. And then one day we lose our religion. I did. I didn't really want to, but I did. All of a sudden, it just didn't make any sense in the way that it did before. And this new way of thinking, this new rational way of thinking took over. And, you know, I think it was ninth grade science class. It just stopped making sense. And so I become rational and I start figuring things out. And then there's something that makes me want to move to Boulder, Colorado from Western Pennsylvania. I wanted to get away from the Steel Valley and all of the, you know, traditionalism there and modernity as well. But I wanted more. Part of it probably was I was a gay guy, you know, in the 70s. And it just wasn't a future for me in Youngstown, Ohio anymore. So I came to Boulder, Colorado, and, you know, joined the counterculture here and became a meditator and so all of that stuff. And at some point that, you know, that fed me for years and still does. All of it does now. That's the great thing, is that at Integral, I get to have all of it. I don't have to decide between God and science. I can realize that I have a mythic stage. Everybody does, but you know, to the degree that you're first tier and modern, you repress it. You know, it's still working. It still pops its head up. But, you know, we have to choose one or the other. But at Integral, what a relief. We get to have it all. And at some point, nothing less than everything will do. And so that's a little, you know, we see that in our own personal development as well as the evolution of the culture. So anyway, Kathy or Jerry, any comments or questions you want to throw out?
Thinking about, there's a couple comments in the chat, and I encourage people to put more, but the one that, and the one that seems to focus most on the culture wars and about othering other people, and the question seems to come from, how do we not other people? But like, how do we make sense in Integral of what looks like violent, harmful, conspiratorial rantings? Like,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
just like
well,
the frustration.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
what makes it? What's the motivation?
Yeah, well, part of it is with you know, conspiratorial thinking and so forth. That is the currency of the pre-modern world. You know, people talked about Trump as being post-truth, when in fact, developmentally, he was pre-truth. You know, he was operating at this stage of development where, you know, you just believe things, that there's a big daddy or a big mama who's telling you what to do. If you think about the world before rationality came online in democracy in the modern world. If you think of monarchies and warlords and gangs, it's all about conspiracy. You know, there really isn't a rational standard on which to judge things. And developmentally, this is one of the great things about, you know, integral practice, if you will, is that we all have that stage operational. We all, there's a story of this world that we all just want to believe. It just makes sense to us. It was in a way given to us. And, you know, at Integral, we become suspicious of that. You know, we naturally don't want to be satisfied with that anymore. And we want other perspectives, but it's still there. And I sometimes think, you know, people talk about you know, our democracy is under threat and at the end of our democracy. I'm not sure that any of us at our heart are truly democratic in the sense that, you know, I know for myself, if I could have waved a magic wand and made sure that Trump wasn't elected, I probably would have. Is that democratic? No, not necessarily. We all have that where we want our side to win. You know, we all have a sense of how the world should be. And again, at Integral, you know, that's not enough. We're suspicious of it. And, you know, we want it's just an imperative that we challenge that. But, you know, and this is, it's hard actually in a way. At some point, we have to realize that not everybody sees it that way. We typically see that we have this default that everybody sees the world the way we do. It's just obvious. It's self-evident the way the world is. You know, Trump ought not be president. I mean, hello. But then you realize, wait a second. There are other people for whom he's a standard bearer for a world that they see valuable and under threat, and he's the guy who's going to, you know, set things right and stop this craziness of these gender and this anti-racism and, you know, all of the stuff that's so consternating to people who are pre-postmodern, actually. So, you know, that's one of the great things about, you know, integral thinking is that we just, it's a natural, we naturally want to challenge any point of view. We just can't, it's like Teflon. We just can't hang out anywhere for too long. And that's, you know, that's the good news and the bad news, because there's, you know, most of my liberal friends think I'm conservative. My conservative friends think I'm liberal. I mean, you know, I don't feel like anybody in my world except my fellow integralists really get it. They don't. And that's, you know, it's either the most arrogant thing in the world to say, you know, that we have this view that, you know, where we get everybody and they don't get us, or else it's true. I'm still not exactly sure which, because when I look at the world and I look at, you know, David Brooks and I look at this one and I look at that one and I read these people and I think, for God's sakes, you ought to read a Ken Wilber book. You know, you ought to, you know, you ought to try this on. And again, I feel like I'm either the most arrogant person on earth or else I actually have something here. And, you know, depends on the day, but that's one of the sort of things that's going on for me.
Right.
Kathy, can I jump in, Kathy, real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Eric, Jeff raised the question of early on today, we had a little bit of a bot invasion with people jumping in. And I want you to answer in terms of when it's appropriate to drop into a healthy, informed red to deal with aggression. And just for Eric's information, Jerry threw those people out of the collective. So that was a good red, I thought. But could you talk about that, Jeff? When we're integrally aware of dropping into red or blue as needed?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, we just in general want to be friendly to our own red. You know, that part of us that is alive and passionate and wants to be seen and heard and, you know, listened to, and we want to get our way. And that's actually the juice of our identity, you know. And the other stage, you know, um, I was listening to an interview with George Will, the columnist, and somebody was talking about how his ideas are repressive. And he said, I like repression. We need to repress this, you know, selfishness that we have. And so that's, you know, that move into, that's what traditionalism brings. That's where we, you know, surrender to God, you know, and we stop being such a little brat. But that brat's still there, you know. And so we want to be friendly with that brat. You know, we want to call on him or her when the time is right, when somebody approaches us in a dark alley, for instance, or somebody's taking advantage of us, or somebody's coming in and just trying to create chaos and mayhem. No, we want to draw the line there. And, you know, it's one of the things that is a problem when we get particularly to postmodern, because postmodernity is so tuned in to the victim of these previous stages that it has no defenses. You know, it wants, if anybody has a victim status, they can come in and they get to be in charge. And it's a mess. I mean, we've all been there. We've all sat in our green circles where somebody's just riding roughshod over the group. And you know, how do you, we see it in the crisis of homelessness slash addiction, the permissive of criminal elements. I see it here in Boulder. You know, people who are a threat to public order, by God. And you know, are they our brothers and sisters? Yes. Yes. Yes, they're our brothers and sisters. And we need to love them and we need to care for them. Do we let them, you know, do we let them come in and wreck something that is ordered? No. And you know, I think right now as a culture, we're sort of at a stage where we're trying to figure out how that works, you know, and it's, you know, it's not easy. It's not supposed to be easy. We fail our way forward. We flounder our way forward. But we do have to draw hard lines. We do have to say, this is in and this is out of this particular situation. And at the same time, having a, you know, a universal love for just everybody, including, you know, and this is hard for me to say, Trump, you know, including the people who are just natural enemies. They're our natural enemies in the wild. And we don't want to see them coming in and wrecking, you know, what we hold sacred. So, you know, I don't think it's ever really that clear. Sometimes it's really pretty clear. I mean, we do want to get rid of the, you know, Zoom bombers, I guess. I just turned down my volume because I couldn't think and I had to talk. That's how I handled it. But, you know, we have to keep the order and we have to draw lines. And I think that's a challenge for the culture at this stage.
Thanks, Jeff. I see John had a good question here. What are some of the tools I can use to assess my own developmental path and identify gaps in my own development? He says, I often feel frustrated that others are not developed enough to build society and vote the way I'd like them to. But what questions can I work with to respond to that impatience within myself?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is where the spiral dynamics and the map of human development really is really helpful, because we can see that we want to have all of these stages lit up. And now, they all sort of hate each other. They're natural enemies, progressives and traditionalists, red. Um, Even the earlier stages that are magic, we want to have magic online. So let's just look at it. We want to assess ourselves. We want to do an integral inventory, and we want to say, okay, how am I doing in this terms of this sensitive self? Am I actually sensitive to, or how much more sensitive can I be? Because at integral, we realize that there's a horizontal evolution of each of these stages. All of them really want to get bigger within us. So how can I become even more sensitive to the people who have been left out? Even if they scare me, even if they turn me off, how do I explain, for instance, or how do I deal with the fact that if we're using the woke racist and anti-racist ideas, that Black people have 1/10 the net worth of white people, of that in every social metric or many social metrics, they're behind, that there's a cultural gap that still wants to be, felt and brought in. And we want to be open to that, even though we may be resistant to that. We want to see that perhaps the natural state of human sexuality is fluid. Maybe there's more fluidity than we thought. Maybe our children and grandchildren will have a whole different sort of sensibility around love and sex that we do, that we would find very, very threatening. So we want to sort of work with that and open ourselves up and challenge ourselves to become ever more sensitive to these karmas of history that are still playing out. So we want that. So then we also want to be more rational. So in terms of, for instance, with COVID, we see that the science tells us this, and then the science tells us that, and then it was no masks, and then it's masks, and then it's vax, and then it's therapeutics. And we want to let all of that in. And we can see how, it's hard to do that. If you're on Twitter, there's the people who it's just so polarized with both sides talking about the science and, but we want to become ever better at analyzing and becoming rational and noticing where, these forces of sensitivity, these forces of myth, they just are sort of animal nature wants to override that, but we want to keep that as its own thing, rationality. And then we want to be faithful to something bigger than ourselves, and that's moving into this mythic stage or this traditional stage. And as we take our integral inventory, we can see how are we where might we be deficient here? And I'll use an example that I notice a lot in the children of my friends. Most of my friends were good liberal progressives. They had a lot of allergies to God and patriotism and country and that sort of thing. And so they raised their children that way. And so a lot of my friends' kids are just naturally going back and rehabilitating this in themselves. I have one who, Boulder wasn't liberal enough for him. He had to move to Portland. And so he moved to Portland, and he became almost unreachably liberal, all of these things that you sort of emblematic of this hyper progressivism. And he's now taking the courses to become a good Catholic. He started reading Roger Scruton. He started listening to conservatives. Part of it was he was a heterosexual white male, and he realized that, I don't know if there's a place for me in this world that I think is the right one. And so I'm going to church with him next week. And he's still hip, he's still liberal, but he's opening himself to this, faith. There's a wonderful quote by Blaise Pascal that I love. I think of it all the time, where he says that things that are human have to be seen to be loved. But the things that are divine have to be loved to be seen. That's good traditionalism right there, is that you're just going to take it on faith. And so, he's not sure about Jesus, the only begotten Son, and all of the teachings of the Catholic Church, but there's something that wants to be rehabilitated or brought online, lit up in him. And I think there's a lot of us in the integral world. Most of us come out of progressivism. Most of us have natural allergies to, to the values of traditionalism. And so we want to look at that and see, what can we be faithful to? I think we can be faithful to emergence itself. That's my God or goddess, if you will, is that I feel it, I see it all around me, and it's alive, and I have a faith in it that feels real traditional, and I like it that way. It feels like there's a sense in which it feels like home to me. Back when I was a good little Christian boy at our Edinburgh Christian Church, but now brought forward into a far bigger structure of consciousness that can allow it to be, doesn't have to explain it away, doesn't have to make it, be colonized by the other stages, but just lets it be what it is. Little faithful Jeff is back. And I like that. And then there's the stage prior to that of magic, where, the world is enchanted and we're a hero of our own story. This is getting more into the red, where heroics matter and great myths, and the trees and the clouds, and this is the religion of the spirits, the ancestors. I have a picture of my great-grandmother who we lived with until I was 4 years old, and she was just an angel to me. And I think of her all the time. I bring her, I actually, I don't want to say I pray to her, but if I need guidance, I talk to her. And I have a whole committee of spirits that I commune with. I don't know who they are, but I will say this: if I talk to them and ask them for guidance, I get it. And sometimes it's the trees and the clouds and the beautiful blue sky. I mean, part of it is to go back even and read history of these earlier stages of development. And, I was just reading a biography of Genghis Khan. And, he's a bad guy in many ways, but he just had this attachment to the great blue sky that he would, whenever things got tough, that's where he would go. And so, we want that. And then we also want to even get into the earlier stage of, in a way, pre-self-conscious. And this is a lot of what we do when we do meditation work, and you know, where we endeavor to relate to consciousness without a lot of thought, awareness without a lot of thought. Okay, so it's like my dogs. You know, it's an animal sort of, just, but it's oh my God. I mean, and of course with meditation, as you deconstruct the mind and you realize what's left, that's what's left, just awareness itself. Oh my God, you know, in which everything is arising under its own power, and we're part of it, and we're being lived by it, and we're living it, and whew, it's good stuff. And so
I'll bring out my inner red and say, you know what, maybe it's time for a second breakout group.
oh, good. There we go. Yeah, you're right. It is, isn't it? So anyway, that's, you know, and then maybe that's a good kickoff to the next breakout, which would be to, let's share a little bit about our own understanding of our, you know, how each of these stages are being lit up in our own lives and where we might be deficient. And so maybe that's a good a conversation topic. And again, any comments or questions, put them in the chat.
Yeah, why don't you say that one or two more times so all 71 of us have that in our heads.
Yeah. So, you know, I just walked through, you know, the part of us as we take our integral inventory, because again, from an integral perspective, we're aware of and friendly to all of these previous stages in the culture, in other people, and in ourselves. So we want to make sure that they're, you know, that we're not out of balance here. So we want this ever increasing sensitivity to, you know, animals and the climate and races and, you know, the victims of history. We want to be ever more rational and, you know, ruthless in our analysis of things. We want to be faithful to something that's bigger than ourselves. We move into that traditional, more mythic stage. We want to be alive to the magic of every moment, to being a hero of our own story, of being on a journey of our life and of our life mattering, you know. Part of the problem with post-modernity and modernity is, you know, the meaning. There's a lot of talk in the integral and integral adjacent world about the meaning crisis. And, you know, this is it. What is the meaning of your life? And then, of course, just awareness without thought. You know, to what degree are you capable of easily, and this is integral, as we move fluidly, there's less friction as we move from one stage to the other, because they're all there, they're all available. So again, a little self-analysis and sharing of how that's arising for you and how you see yourself and where you might be, put a little more work.
Very cool. I think we'll have some great conversations. I've recreated the breakout room, so hopefully everybody's going to have different people to talk to get to know different people. I made them again for 16 minutes. I'll put a question in post and go and have fun and have some good discussions, and we'll be back.
Welcome back, everybody.
One thing I had cooking from when people, before we had that breakout session, maybe was something to the effect of, we're thinking as integralists and here because we're thinking about the culture wars, is evolution something like a for sure thing? Or, you know, when we look at certain trends in politics, one way to look at it is, are we backsliding? And so how do we make sense of it? Like is there just, some people look at it like a swing in the pendulum? How are you looking at these, where we are in the culture wars, from this, like, what if we feel like, hey, this is not a move forward? Convince me otherwise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do think that the pendulum swings, but I also think that the clock moves forward. So, you know, we're going back and forth, and we sort of regroup, and then, but the net effect is forward in my opinion, and it is. Are we regressing as a culture? I don't think so. I think what's happening is we're in a new world. I was just talking with my partner in the group about how we evolve in first person, second person, and third person. That's these three realms of evolution. So it's me, it's us together, and then there's this sort of there's this technology, and there's these new ways of being human. And one of the big third person moves that a culture has taken in the last 10, 20 years is a move into green communication. So social media, mass communication, where everybody gets to be seen and heard. That wasn't the case before. I grew up in a traditional conservative, socially conservative setting where all we got every night was Walter Cronkite or Eric Sevareid or David Brinkley. That was it. And that's where we got our news, and we had our newspaper, and maybe you got a magazine, but there you were. And so now these particularly these pre-modern, I don't want to say people, but people who are operating at sort of this mythic stage of development, they're in the game now. They were silent. I thought we were, I myself thought that, when I left home and I left the Steel Valley and I came to Boulder, that I could forget about them because, they were constrictive and annoying and bigoted and patriotic and religious in a way that I was tired with and done with. And I thought, I learned about evolution. I thought, we're going to move beyond that. Well, no. What we're doing is we're actually, if you want to call it a regression, I suppose you can, but we're including them now.
Jeff.
And they get to be heard and they get to be seen. And I'm glad, it was going to be pretty arid if we left them behind, it turned out. So a lot of what seems like regression, where everybody's arguing and there's so much consternation and demonization, maybe it's because I grew up with people who hated liberals. That's nothing new to me. I get them, and I get the upside of what they bring to the party, which is this sort of deep loosh, this connection with each other and the family and all of that good stuff. They don't, just keep your hands off of me. I don't want all your new ideas. And so, if you go on social media and Twitter and so forth, everybody's in the game now. And as I often say, evolution is beautiful, but it's not pretty. And a lot of what I think we are called on to do as integralists is to, again, just to, be friendly, to not only be friendly, but I noticed this even in the small groups that I've been in so far, that people are talking like, how can we bring this forward? How can we influence other people? And we do, of course, we want to influence other people and we want to bring the integral view, but we also want to be influenced by them. We want to be seen, but we want to see them too. And so I love now going back to home, and I still have one aunt and uncle left. And it's just mother's milk for me to listen to my uncle talk about how much he loves Trump, and all his Fox News buddies, and God bless them. God bless us all. And I actually, I am not, my job isn't to influence him. My job is to, in a way, be influenced by him, to be reminded of the beauty of, that thinking. So I don't, I think it's ugly. I think there's, everybody's demonizing and, this COVID, it's like everybody was lying. Actually, no, everybody was doing the best they could. And I think on balance, we have had as long as you don't think that arguing means failing, we've had a pretty fruitful time here, and it continues to be. But it's, it's definitely frightening to people who think that it ought to be different, and it's annoying. And again, welcome to human evolution. That's my take on it.
Peggy Hostetler just can she's got a burning question. And then
Good.
I also put in chat to suggest that anybody that wants to share anything insightful that came in your small group discussions, we'd love to hear about that in chat. Go ahead, Peggy. Wait, we can't hear you yet.
Okay.
Now we can.
Okay, we had a discussion about, all the stages and finding people in various stages and so forth. And it was like, Jeff, my gosh, 15 years ago, we were doing that too. And as I said to him, the Jeff that you're listening to now is not the one that I was listening to 15 years ago. There is much more humility, much more, but also recognizing that all these stages continue to live in us, alive and well. I did not think Ken was talking about that 20 years ago.
Mhm.
So we're evolving too. But the other thing that really comes up for me is I feel like I'm part of the first generation, and I'm in my 80s, that really had to deal with the fact that we as human beings, forget God, could destroy this world. And evolution would be just fine. It'll do something, but we could be gone. And so that we have to deal with evolution of culture. Look, we can't solve things with power and killing anymore. Or, what? We have enough stuff to blow ourselves up in 15 minutes and destroy the whole planet. Well, whoopee. So if you could address some of that, Jeff, where
Yeah.
does that leave us?
Yeah, well, every stage has a new crisis to deal with. And there's an existential, if we look back at history, typically it was the tribe on the other side of the mountain, that was our existential threat. That's for 150,000 years, that's most of human history. And that's another interesting thing about evolution, is that it accelerates.
We have
So we move from this tribal, it's just natural warfare. I mean, I think I've quoted it on my podcast, but there's a saying from the Bedouin tribe, and the Bedouin tribe is still alive and well in a sense in Saudi Arabia, but they're coming from that the nomadic, in a way, foot in red, but foot in traditional. And the saying is, I, my brother, and my cousin against the stranger. I and my brother against my cousin. I against my brother. And that is, that is the nature of evolution, is warfare. I mean, and warfare is fruitful. And I wish I could rewrite those rules and just make it all be nice and easy, and we're all just on a nice grassy bank by the river with the lions and the lambs. But war is part of it. But what we can also see is that the emergence is, the warfare is happening less and less on the physical plane. We're doing less and less of our warfare with actual clubs and bombs. Although, we got some big ass bombs that can do a lot of damage, but so far so good. Where warfare is happening now is at the subtle level, or the level of thought and ideology. And so, we'll see. We have the Russians amassed on the border of the Ukraine. Does anybody think it's going to be like the blitzkrieg of the Nazis in Poland? I don't think so. I don't think it's even going to be anything like shock and awe was in the Iraqi war. I don't know what it's going to be, but warfare continues to be, it feels perverse to even say it, less and less inhumane. And that doesn't mean, and what's difficult about that is that people on the receiving end of it, it's as bad as it ever was. It's existential. Somebody's going to blow you up. But what we could say is there's less and less of it, certainly per capita, and relentlessly so, decade after decade after decade. But the warfare continues because evolution likes it. Evolution likes us to fight and friend both. And as best I can tell, we do about 4 friendings for every fighting. That's my latest theory. And that's good. That's the good news. But it still goes on, but moving from the physical to the subtle, or the realm of thought, emotion, ideologies. And there's another stage that, this is the 3 stages of being from Ken Wilber, the gross, subtle, and causal, he calls it. So the gross, physical, subtle, mind, and then the spiritual. And, maybe our future is going to be a certain kind of spiritual warfare, but it'll be less inhumane in the sense of less blood will be shed, but I don't think it'll be any less contentious. And that's probably what we're looking at if that trend continues. So it's a matter of what domain of reality is the war being fought. So
Yeah, somebody put in chat about an art, just having us understand. It seems to be about understanding ourselves better, and how evolution seems to move forward accidentally. Was an article that was in the Atlantic magazine about anger, where they described an experiment of highly bigoted posts in a very conservative neighborhood. The surprise was their people became less bigoted, almost because they were they found the others offensive because they were so disgusted by the anger and bigotry, and that seemed to move them in a less angry, less bigoted direction. It's kind of just an interesting way things work.
It's one of the things that it's sort of so counterintuitive about what goes on in social media is, everybody's in the game there. And I think of like my grandfather. He had an ideology. He never changed his whole life. He never thought any differently in his 80s than he did in his 30s, as far as I could tell. I mean, he grew in various ways, but not politically, not in terms of ideology. And now you put something out there and then somebody will argue with you. And then you get defensive, and then you argue back, and then you call each other names. And what's happening in that process is, painful and ugly as it is that there's a softening of these intellectual hardened edges. There's a little more aeration happening, a little more light, a little more space and air. And it doesn't feel like that at times. It feels like sometimes it's actually, we're getting contracted, and we are, but, not for long, because we can't stay out of each other's hair. And we never could, actually. But now we have the means to do it with people all over the world. And we can also see that, there's a certain globalization of these stages, where the conservatives in America are sympathetic to the Russians. There's this new sort of traditionalism that's sort of gaining its a global identity. There's a modern global identity. There's a postmodern global identity. And, you know, we can see that happening as well. And, you know, it's just endlessly fascinating and endlessly painful and endlessly fruitful
Right.
and accelerating. That's what's also interesting.
I
And
had
to
a
ex-
thought,
okay.
Jeff, on endlessly humbling.
Yes.
So I was going to ask you how the 2016 election changed you.
You know what? I got to bring out my inner red again and say we're at 4 minutes to the end of our 2 hours. So maybe we could just delay asking the question and answering that, because there's a lot more discussion we could do, probably hours worth. But we want to close up the meeting by having Jerry give a couple announcements.
Okay, yes, thank you. And the first thing is, thank you, Jeff. You know, it's been a great, you know, great to hear you go through these things, even though, you know, I've heard a lot of this before, but I love hearing you explain these things to me, and having you doing that for like the 10 years now has been such a, because of the consistency, it's really had an impact on me. It's helped me to learn things that I did not learn hearing them the first time. And I think, you know, when I hear you, I think I could listen to Jeff all day, and some days I do. You know,
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
so thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you. And what a great privilege to do this. And I appreciate the invitation, and it's an honor.
Well,
And what
great.
fun. How fast did 2 hours go, huh?
Yeah, for sure. So what we're going to do here to wrap up, we will have the social time, and you know, as I said, stick around for another half hour to an hour. But before we do that, just a couple quick things. Tom, if you could give us a little update on upcoming meetings that we're having here at San Diego Integral.
Really helps to unmute. Real quick, as Jerry had mentioned before, Abigail Lyman from GTC is going to be with us next month. Remember, it's the second Saturday every month, 4 to 6 p.m. And she's talking on paradoxes, polarities, and interdependence of the individual and the collective development. The month after, April 9th, we have Sally Adam Jones joining us. She's asking, who are you? An integral understanding of gender. That always gets the feathers flying. And then on May 14th, 2022, some guy named Tom Habib speaking on We Space and the highly sensitive person. And the more I look at the data of this study I ran, we've got a lot of work to do in order to be able to integrate those capabilities in ourselves. So that's a summary of what's coming up.
Thank you, Tom. So before we sign off here, or the formal part of the meeting, I would like to just mention again that you can get further information about San Diego Integral on sandiegointegral.org. And again, if you are so inclined, stop by there to visit our fabulous donation button. And again, we just do have some expenses to keep the thing running, so we appreciate your support there. And I think that's it. So for those of you who are going to sign off at the end of the formal meeting here, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate having so many new people, and hope you can come back and join us. And as I said, we're going to try our best once we even start meeting in person to do hybrid meetings and have and continue to have our guests from all over the world join us. So thank you so much. And but if you have to leave now, again, thank you. And we will keep the space open for informal discussion starting right about now.
If I can go back to asking my question on humbleness. 2016 election, Jeff, I think you kind of answered the question, is subtle warfare. But were we a little bit overly grandiose on where we thought we were developmentally at that time? And then what happened subsequently?
Yeah, I sure was. I mean, 8 years of Obama, I thought we were, you know, we finally have reached the promised land. you know, and talk about, people who are just de facto integral. They just naturally have a ability to harmonize different perspectives and talk to different people and think in different ways. And is Obama an exemplar of that or what? And I always have this, sort of private fantasy that one day he's going to get integral, like so many of us have, and he'll be the great, sort of bringer of integral into the world, because he is. So, I thought we had it made with him, but little did I know what was, wasn't buying it. That he wasn't resonating with my relatives, that's for sure.
Right.
I mean, I'd go back home and they'd be like hating Obama, and I think, what? I mean, I get that maybe his policies or whatever, but you hate Obama? And they did. And we have the reaction to that. And again, there's this, I see you're going to have somebody talk about polarities there. Part of evolution is, differentiation and integration. So we have the thing, then we have the thing, and if the thing finally, evolution doesn't let the thing stay the thing. Because so there's this growth and there's this tension and there's this consternation and there's this split. There's a differentiation. And that's one of the things, one of the ways that we can look at the culture war is that I understand the right so much better than I used to. I appreciate the right so much more than I used to. I even get Trump, I get that he's psychologically, diagnosable, there's no question about that. But I also get that he loves America in his way. And he, in terms of some right winger, if you remember his speech, he talked about how the gays have to be part of things, and he was, he actually moved the ball.
You don't
But
see it bad.
could I watch him on TV? No, I still, I thank God for the remote control. Anytime I see his face, it's like, ugh. But welcome to evolution. And so we go from, when you have a country going from Obama to Trump, that there's something going on, and it's a differentiation. And I think we're waiting for the integration, and we'll see how that goes. And I mean, what in the world is going to happen here? Who's going to be the nominee of either party is, I don't know. I mean, what a unpredictable, at least now I know it's unpredictable. I used to think it was more predictable. So I guess I learned that.
You spoke about the fluidity of spiral as being aspirational. It almost feels like we're doing that culturally already.
Say more.
Well, that we're all over the map as different stages emerge in the volume of their expression. And it seems like it's demanding a level of integration that we didn't fully appreciate it. I think we thought it was just going to be a linear aspirational thing, and man, it's come back and whacking us upside the head, saying this is reality.
Yeah.
No,
Can I say something?
Yeah.
You're doing extrapolation. We were kind of advancing all the time, so we will continue to. But I think that extrapolation, we see it like in the market of everything. You build an extrapolation and boom, something happens, and there is a breakout. And I just following what Tom said, I mean, rationalism brought us maybe to wherever we could develop as species, and without maybe genetic engineering or God knows, with being nanotechnology or whatever, combining with computer, maybe we cannot move forward. Maybe we are not built to develop, and some of us maybe can, but not enough to pull the entire thing forward.
Well, I want to let everybody speak. I just want to say one thing is that every emerging stage is unthinkable to the stage that it emerges out of. A good traditionalist in the traditional world could even conceive of modernity. Modernity had no idea what was going to happen with postmodernity. So, the next human is going to would be very shocking to us, I think, just by definition, if the trend continues. And will it be bioengineering? I don't know. In some ways, I'm glad I only get, one lifetime here, or I don't know how many lifetimes, but I'm glad that, I think 80 years is about right, and it's about all anybody can handle. And then we got to get, we got to let the next ones come online. So I'm done. I'll be quiet and I'm eager to hear from everybody here or anybody.
I'll jump in. In my 2 breakout groups, the crazy times, and I think they're necessarily crazy times. Like we have diversity, then we have integration, diversity, integration. I think that is kind of a natural pendulum effect of the clock. And with the advent of Trump, I think what he permitted was there was a huge oppressed class. Call it the bigoted, the racists, the ignorant, whatever labels you want to put on them, positive or negative. And the 60s, with the advent of postmodernism, kind of created that with shaming these lesser evolved people into silence. And yeah, when Obama made it, it's like, wow, we're really doing well as a society, as a culture, whatnot. And Trump made it obvious that there was this oppressed class, as it were, for lack of a better word, that needed to be heard, needed to be felt, known, whatever. Trump gave permission for that. He took the lid off of all that. Being nice, the nicey of postmodernism just got kicked in the butt. And I think it needed to. And that's part of what I think we're seeing here is the way evolution plays out. It's not predictable, like Jeff was just saying. Any stage can't really predict the next stage. It just sort of unfolds into it. And I look at the phenomenon of Trump is kind of like the stock market. When you have a correction, when prices get too ahead of fundamentals, there's a correction, it drops back down. And I see our society evolving as kind of like we were getting way out here and we needed this correction. And Trump triggered that. And so he's doing a service to us. It's an ugly, uncomfortable, disheartening in some ways experience we're having as a result of this, but I think it's necessary. And I think it was inevitable in hindsight and had to happen. And I look at how can I make the best of this? Because I have family like Jeff that pretty rigid on the right side. And I'm not left, I'm not right, I'm really not. I'm pretty good at seeing both sides, and not that that helps me a lot with my family. Because when I show one person, I can see their side. The person that thought I was on their side gets upset, and vice versa. I had the same challenge in business as a consultant. I'm trying to do mediation work. So I think we're in an era that we need to be, and it doesn't mean it's going to turn out pretty. I'm open to the possibility that the whole thing crashes and burns, be it the world, not the planet. The planet takes care of itself. But for me, I'm looking at how do I want to step in and engage? How much do I want to just sit back and let it all happen? Because I'm comfortable with both, sitting back, let it happen, and also jumping in and getting into the mess. And I just wish us all the best of luck.
Thank you, Larry. I see Joy has her hand raised, and for those of you who would like to comment, you can go to the reactions button and click raise hand, and then we'll put you kind of in the queue. And Jeff, you're always welcome to jump in and respond if anything comes up for you, certainly. Joy? You want to unmute yourself, please?
Okay. All right. This discussion is very true to my life and the way I'm impacted with the different culture. I was born in Africa, living in America, and firsthand experiencing all this, fireworks of ideas and everything. But I think, going forward, looking at Ken Webble's work, that I'm not an expert in it, but I have general knowledge, is that if there is a way that the human culture, because it's always there's a shadow, whether it is a human being, myself, I have a shadow, or my culture, or there is something that is in a human ability to frame and manage their life. They make the other person wrong just as a shadow. We do it on a personal level. So there is this movement is creating a value for humanity, which is the same in Japan or China. But when it's a dominant culture or dominant value, like say China, America, Japan, whatever, Africa before, whatever it is, or at the personal level as a group, we experiencing that, then we get to be in that box where the shadow is the one that's hurting, that we become blind to the other people. So it is wonderful that the integral community is there, but I think the more we spread it out, the easier, because people don't know when they are in that box and they don't see the other person, and whether it is the president, this president, or that president. If I am in that box, I can't see anybody else doing right. So I think putting the light on it and bringing humanity, what is common to all of us, will be a better world without a lot of war, or there will be more peaceful and more life. That's what I'm thinking. Sorry.
Thank you, Joy. Jeff, you have any reaction or comment?
I've just loved it, and just feeling moved and loving to hear other people share their integral, vision and sensibility. And again, I differentiate the self-conscious integral movement, of which we're a part, and the other, I see it on Twitter, I see it in social media. There's and I see it even in the last year arising more. And that is the people who are just tired of what you were saying, Joy, being in the box. They're just tired of it. They don't know why. They're the left, the right. They want to move forward, and I'm seeing more and more of these people. They often refer to themselves as heterodox. There's sort of a label that's arising, but other as well. And I find it very encouraging. And so I want to point that out. And again, they know nothing of integral theory, but they're operating at an integral sensibility or stage.
Great, thank you. And I see Marge is up next. You'll need to unmute, Marge.
Muted. Hi, everyone, and hi, Jeff. When I was at the last Integral Living Room and you were talking, you talked some about love. And in that era, it's been several years ago now, you also were talking about that on your podcast. And I didn't hear you talk about that as much tonight. What I'm realizing for myself is that I find myself in all of the different pieces of the puzzle, but I find myself in ways that integrate the good and the true and the beautiful. And maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm an idealist, but I still see that hope for love. Letting love show the way. And I also see another emerging vibrational wave coming in creative energy. And of course, my book is written based on the stages of co-creation, based on Genesis 1. And this is one of my primary arguments still with Integral. I think Integral ignores involution, the descent of spirit, and focuses on evolution. And I think it's more like the Kundalini, both functioning simultaneously at the same time. And it depends on where we are experiencing our blocks, how it shows up in our lives. So I'd just love to hear you comment on those little pieces.
I'd ask you to define involution and tell us a little bit more about how you see it.
Yeah, involution for me is really easy. It's the descent of spirit, and it recognizes a vibrational field that is beyond the fifth dimension, going into, if you look at Terry Fallon's stages, it would include the causal realm or the meta-aware realm, but it descends, and it's always already present in every single person at every single level, and recognized in many different ways. It can be recognized as passion and purpose. It can be recognized as romance. It can be recognized as love of family. It can be recognized as love of the Bible. It can be recognized as love of Integral. And I'm finding myself moving into mystical awareness profoundly, because I'm finding that integration more than I am in Integral. And so I don't feel it as a warring experience. I feel it as an invitational experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I have any great further insight. I thought that's beautifully said, but I will say that it brings up a thought that I actually had the great good fortune of being able to work with Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled, and back in the day. And I got to know him, and he said he was so wise and so good. And you know, that book is actually has the record for New York Times bestseller. It was on the bestseller list for 13 years. You know, and there's a reason. And one of the things that he would say was that every great truth is a truth whose opposite is also a great truth, except for one truth, and that is that love makes the world go round. Damn, I love that. And, you know, the whole spiral is a rising, descending, morphing, mixing, integrating in this greater space of love. And I think, you know, realizing that with a capital R, realizing that is, you know, just a wonderful thing. So that's what I'd say. Thanks, Marge. And good to see you again. Good to see a lot of the old friends from the Integral Institute days.
Great, thanks, Jeff. I see Eloy has a hand up.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Jeff and thank him for helping me recognize the shadow issue. And the shadow came around Jeff's optimism. Like when I first started listening to Jeff, I was like, oh man, this guy's, he's just so, everything's so good for him. And anyway, it took me a while to figure out that was the shadow issue. And now I enjoy your optimism and your humor. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've never, I know I'm optimistic but I've never loved that sort of description. And I think I finally figured out what I like better. I'm not optimistic in the sense that I don't think really bad stuff is going to happen. I think it is. And I'm not sure that we're not going to go down and then back. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But what I am now, and the word I use more and more is I'm faithful. I'm just faithful. I don't know, but I see the history. I see the trend. I feel emergence itself. It's like my friend Namali said, my religion is the religion of emergence itself. And I remember that made a big impact on me. And so that's how I would describe myself at this point. Faithful to that.
See, Karen is up next.
Yes, thank you. This kind of what you just said, Jeff, and thank you so much for being here. This is great. The discussion about optimism, and then I'd like to cycle back to what Tamara was saying a little while ago. So many people around me, and I live in Berkeley, California, so it's a lot of green and some of the best of green, but also, a lot of toxic green. But so many of the people around me are in such despair about and see only as all of the quote first tier stages do. They cannot conceive that there's another level beyond the current level that we're at. And so as the structures of that level break down, in first tier, we only see the ruin of everything, the end of the world, the apocalypse. And there's just a lot of apocalyptic talk. And as a dedicated integralist, I just kind of want to bring in my own version of the religion of evolution. Like you said, Jeff, the universe has 13.8 billion year track record of producing greater complexity that could never have been understood or predicted from the previous levels. You go all the way back to the Big Bang. And I've actually got a spread chart that charts this, the next new order where you, just starting with the Big Bang, where you need a whole new science to study it. And like you said, and that accelerates. It's accelerating in a roughly logarithmic rate, which is really scary when you get to human society, because according to how I parse it as a cultural historian, human culture we basically gone through the 6 major stages of the first tier. And if you chart that and then chart it chronologically, it is very roughly logarithmic that the next new emergence of complexity happens roughly an order of magnitude sooner than the one before. And in physical systems, you call it a phase shift. When you shift from one condition to another, there's a period of great volatility. In biological system, you have punctuated equilibrium, where you have periods of sort of stability where evolution happens incrementally, and then suddenly you have some huge period of great upheaval and whole new orders of complexity come online. And these can be in our planet, periods of horrible upheaval, like the Permian extinction, where I think something like 90% of all species went extinct, or ice ball Earth, and where the globe is covered with ice for millions of years, and then out of that comes the Cambrian explosion. Well, when you get into human history, the periods of emergence of the next order of complexity tend to be dark ages. And fortunately, as I parse this, I mean, the dark ages too tend to get shorter. I don't have a whole lot as much confidence in that, but this gets to the issue of the optimism. Oh yes, things are going to get better. There will be a new order. Well, the track record, the 13.8 billion year tracker says, yes, they will. On the other hand, we have to live through some pretty horrific times for a lot of people to get there. And so this is why I have a certain passion for integral. And I've been reading Ken Wilber since 1983, because this gives us a hopeful view of the future, kind of like Star Trek did back the last emergence in the 60s, where the whole postmodern era came online as culture wide. I mean, there had been individuals and threads like psychology and so on before, but a whole new cultural emergence. And amid, and it took 30 years, World War I, the 30s, and World War II, for that shift to happen in the next order, the postmodern order, to come online. That was pretty disastrous for a lot of people. And then we got postmodernism with all its dignities. But, what was it? I was driving to a point here. But there's what we had, those of my age, I think I was 15 when the first Star Trek came online, and that gave us a vision of hope for the future at a time when we were digging bomb shelters. We didn't, those of my generation, a lot of my colleagues just never expected not to live to grow up. Well, of course, the planet's going to go up in a nuclear holocaust, because none of us are going to live to grow old. But then along comes the Star Trek and shows us a collective vision of a future in which the planet's at peace and so on. And this is why I have such a passion for integral, and what all you people are doing, what you're doing, Jeff, with your podcast, is to give us a vision of hope for the future. Let's start telling some beautiful stories about our future, so that maybe this dark age, maybe it can be a kinder, gentler dark age rather than a longer, more brutal one. So it's just my expression of gratitude, my understanding, my expression of gratitude for what all you people have been doing all along.
Oh, yeah. I like that, a gentler dark age.
Please.
If you look at human history, boy, so some dark ass stages. Whew. I mean, again, I didn't make the rules here, but it has been a brutal journey, and we can note that it's less brutal. That's a good thing we can note, at least pay attention to.
And as a cultural historian, I can say it has gotten less brutal. I mean, people are in such despair about how bad things are. You go back 2,000 years to the ancient Romans, where like 40% of the population of Rome was enslaved, where compassion was for wimps. If the virtue meant you're virile, you're a man, you're tough. I mean, the further you go back in human history, the worse it was. It has gotten better as we've gone along, which is kind of scary, but it's actually also very hopeful.
No, goodness, truth, and beauty arise through the ugliness and lies and badness. That's the seems to be the rules of the game, and I wish it were different, but we can note the slightly gentler dark age. Love it.
So we're looking for dark age light.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I see Larry is up next.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Tom shot me a chat asking me if I had anything on involution, to go back to Marge's point. And I said, yeah. Bear with me, I'm not used to articulating this. I want to be with this. Involution. I've done a lot of meditating on why would we want to step out of the isness, basking in this incredible fullness, being, having everything. Excuse me. And to shut off an alert. Why would we want to step out of that? And what came to me was we wanted something in addition to the isness, not instead of, but in addition to. But as we stepped out of that into the stage of duality, then another stage of duality, a further stage. This comes somewhat out of Ken's first book, Spectrum of Consciousness. He wrote it in '73. He did a beautiful job of articulating coming out of the isness and what he called it involution, I think, in that book, if I remember right. And just wanting to be into other, become other, and not just be the I am of the isness. So all of this muck and mire and craziness or whatever stuff that's going on is us experiencing being in the otherness, other than just isness. And as a part of that process, we've largely forgotten the isness of the I am that we are. Not good or bad, it's just kind of the way it's playing out. Some of us are becoming more awake or aware of that than others, and that's all good too. And the evolution then is we've come far enough out of the isness, this turnaround starts to happen. We want to go back, not that we know it is such. The example of the prodigal son is maybe a little story, a little analogy, metaphor of wanting to go back to be with the Father, the isness, whatever you want to call it. And a parallel concept to have with this is the eros energy and the agape energy. We think of the agape energy as coming back down into the world, bringing it in, the higher into the lower. And eros is following the evolution, wanting to get more and more out of where we've been in terms of what's behind us, in terms of heaviness, matter, even eventually get out of the subtle, get into the causal, get into the non-dual. So in the agape and eros, I discovered, were not two energies, one going down, agape, coming into the world, eros coming out. They're simultaneously one energy. They're simultaneously one thing. And I thought, what's an example of what that even looks like if they're one and the same thing? And I'm not religious, but I'm very much into the spiritual and consciousness development aspects of life. And Christ showed up, as Jesus showed up, as an example. Everything he did simultaneously was an expression of agape and eros. It simultaneously connected him more with the source, the Father, the isness, and simultaneously connected him with the world, agape and eros at the same time. And it's like, oh, wow. Oh, so it's doable. There's an exemplar that demonstrates that. Aside from all the religiosity of Jesus, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I guess we're coming to the end of our time. Thank you, Larry. You know, you get to something that, if I may, Tom, close with, and it's a poem that I've often shared at these various integral events, and I think it really just, you know, at some point we go to poetry and art to, you know, really get a handle on these things. And this is a poem I'd end with. Is that good, Tom? Yeah, good. So yep. I will. It's by one of the great integral forebearers, Walt Whitman, one of my favorite poets. And it's from Song of the Open Road. And I think it really captures what it is to have an integral consciousness. He says, "From this hour, I ordain myself loosed of limits and imaginary lines, going where I list, my own master, total and absolute. Yet listening to others, considering well what they say, pausing, searching, receiving, contemplating. And then gently, but with undeniable will, divesting myself of the holds that would hold me, I inhale great draughts of space. The East and the West are mine, and the North and the South are mine. I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. All seems beautiful to me. I can repeat over to men and women, you have done such good to me. I would do the same to you. I will recruit for myself and you as I go. I will scatter myself among men and women as I go. I will toss a new gladness and roughness among them. Whoever denies me, it shall not trouble me. Whoever accepts me, he or she shall be blessed and shall bless me. Now I see that the secret of the making of the best persons, it is to grow in the open air and to eat and sleep with the earth. Henceforth, I ask not for good fortune. I am my own good fortune. Henceforth, I whisper no more, whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Strong and content, I travel the open road.
Wow.
Thank
What a
you.
fitting ending
Beautiful, Jeff. Thank you.
and a clarion call for what we're capable of.
What's the name of that poem again, Jeff?
It's called Song of the Open Road by Walt Whitman.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, so I think that's a beautiful way to wrap things up. So thank you again, Jeff. It's
Thank you
great
so
to have
much.
you here.
Thank you,
and
Jeff.
Thanks for all the folks who attended today.
Thank you, Jeff.
And,
Thank
feel
you.
free to
Jeff.
open your
Thank you,
mics and
one
say
and all.
goodbye, and we'll wrap it up here.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
one and all.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
See you
Thank
next month.
you.
So far.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you,
next
Jeff.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the Integral community.